Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this third webinar in our series Festival for Finance that we're running during the course of July. And so our session today, we are focusing on food waste and food cost control and looking at how we can creatively manage that rising cost that we're seeing in so many P&Ls at the moment. So the Festival for Finance is a joint collaboration between the Master Innholders, Arena for Finance, which is my company, and Merlin Consulting. And we've had a series of webinars during the course of the festival. So you will find the recordings of these webinars on the Master Innholders YouTube site. So the two webinars from the last 2 weeks are already there. This one will go up shortly, of course. And then next week, we have a webinar on managing energy costs in your hotel business. And we have a range of great speakers for the event next week as well, who will be looking at the statistics. So we've got hot stats reporting in on how energy costs are increasing based on the research that they do. We have some hotel operators, and we also have the chairman of the Energy Alliance. So some great speakers next week to talk to us about energy management and cost control. So let's come back to our session today. I'll introduce our speakers. We have Eleanor Morris from WRAP. So welcome, Eleanor. Sarah Dovey from Cafoodle, and Adrian Martin from the Edge Hotel School. And of course, Hilary Cook from the Master Innholders and from Merlin Consulting. So before we get into the programme itself, I'm just going to ask Hilary to give us a short introduction to Midas and the Master Innholders programme.
Thank you, Deborah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for this, as Deborah said, third webinar in our series. We're producing this for the Master Innholders who exist to promote best practice within the hotel and hospitality industry. And Midas is our learning arm, really, our education hubbub for anyone who wants to join us. It's free. You can access all the previous recordings from the Master Innholders website, and I'll put that up on the chat in a minute. So it's Midas stands for Master Innholders Developing Additional Skills. So this is a Midas production in collaboration with Deborah and Arena for Finance. So really looking forward to this afternoon. We've got some great stuff planned, so hope you'll all enjoy it. Thank you.
So the format for our webinar today, and we've got lots of content to get through in a very short space of time. So our format today is to hear a little bit from each of our presenters who all have a different angle, a different focus in terms of looking at food and cost control in the hospitality industry. And I'm going to start off by just asking each of our presenters to tell us a little bit about their background so that we get the picture of the different organisations and their own personal journey. So Sarah, can I ask you to first of all just tell us a bit about yourself and Cafoodle?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah, and thanks for inviting me on this afternoon. It's great to be here. So I have been in hospitality for, I'm not going to say how many years, but quite a few years, mainly in finance. So I started with Hilton and Granada, working as financial controllers in London. And then for over 10 years, I was VP of Finance at Red Carnation Hotels. So again, London, and then a lot of international experience with them as well. After that, did a few different things. I worked at the Grove, I worked at the Dorchester Collection. But about 5 or 6 years ago, went to the other side, worked for a procurement company for about 5 years, and now work for Cafoodle. And I've been here 2 years. I'm the operations director at Cafoodle, and we are a software company, kitchen management, control, allergens, nutrients, all those things now that unfortunately or fortunately need compliance, and hopefully people are now digitizing that thing, and we'll talk about that a bit later. That's me. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Sarah. So Adrian, can you tell us a bit about you and the Edge Hotel School?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated many years ago and worked in the trade for about 12 years, about half of those 6 years as a general manager. And then I moved into education, and I'm now vice principal of the Edge Hotel School at the University of Essex. So we have an ethos that students should be able to hit the ground running when they graduate. So they work in a hotel as part of their course, and then graduate with 3 years work experience, essentially. I teach all the finance units, and recently published a book on sort of improving profitability in hotels and restaurants.
Thank you, and hopefully we're going to get some hot tips from your text today as well. So Eleanor, can you tell us a little bit about you and your role at WRAP?
Sure, thanks for inviting me today. So my background is working with government programmes, government funding to support businesses in improving their sustainability and environmental performance. So I have worked with the hospitality sector at WRAP for about 10 years now, and my role at WRAP, we're an NGO. Our aim is around reducing climate change impact, and so all the work that we do with businesses and with consumers is to deliver that. So we work with plastics as well as food and textiles, and then sort of infrastructure about how you collect waste and manage it in a circular economy.
Brilliant, thank you. So just to set the scene, we're here today to talk about food cost, and mainly food cost rather than beverage cost. And so the sort of theory bit is that obviously we know that if we take stock each month in our businesses, we're calculating a figure called the cost of sales. So the opening stock plus our purchases during the course of the period minus the closing stock will tell us the cost of sales. But that cost of sales is not necessarily the cost of the food that's consumed by the consumer. It also includes wastage and pilferage, so a range of possible uses of that food rather than being entirely what the customer consumes. Then we know that in order to achieve our target gross profit percentage, we need to make sure that every item that we produce is costed in terms of the cost of the materials, so the food on the plate, literally. And then we apply a percentage to that to get our target gross profit. But all of us working in the food and beverage sector know there's been a huge amount of pressure on the sector, on the hospitality side of the sector, because of the increasing cost of food. And so whilst the cost of fruit and vegetables is perhaps levelling off a bit at the moment as we have our own seasonal produce coming in here in the UK, but we're still facing increasing cost of meat. So it was chicken a few months ago, and now pork and beef are starting to increase even further, and dairy products as well. So it's quite a large proportion of the different food costs that we have to manage are increasing with inflation. So we've got that challenge then of managing our GPs. And the GP, of course, is then got to cover all the rest of the costs in your business. So the wages, the energy costs, and all the other costs, which, of course, all increasing as well. So it's a very, very challenging time. So we're going to start off by focusing on food waste. And as Eleanor will explain, food waste comes really from three different elements. So the production, the preparation, but also plate waste as well is all part of the picture. I'm going to hand over to Eleanor and let her explain it to us in a bit more detail.
Let me just share my screen. Hopefully you can see that.
Super.
Okay. Great. So yeah, I'm just going to give you a real whistle-stop tour of a bit about food, why it becomes a problem when it becomes waste, and what you can do. There are loads of practical free resources that we've got here from our Guardians of Grub campaign here in the UK. So food and food loss and waste is a massive global issue. We've got a third of food being wasted across the globe, and that's around a backdrop of 1 in 9 people going hungry. The amount of carbon emissions that food and food loss creates is 8% of global emissions, which is enormous, and costs over $940 billion in terms of economic losses. So it's pretty huge in terms of impact. I thought it'd be useful just to highlight, what do we mean by food waste? Actually, what we're talking about is food. So we've got food that's edible, food that becomes inedible. So for example, onion skins and so forth. And then what we're really talking about today is about understanding how does food become waste? And the easiest way to be able to do that is to identify at what point, back of house and front of house, it goes in the bin, basically. So is it prep, spoilage, plate, or other? So for example, if you've got a buffet, you might want to capture the food that's coming from that. And of course, there's also surplus food, so food that can be safely redistributed to other organisations as well. And I thought this would be helpful just to highlight where we're focusing on. So often when we talk about food waste, people think about how to dispose of it correctly, which is a really important part of it. But actually, when we're talking about saving money, making a difference to your bottom line, we're talking about don't buy it in the first place. So prevent the food from being purchased, from being cooked, served and then thrown in the bin, because that all costs you money. Every step of these this area in the hierarchy will end up costing you. So the most expensive thing that you can do financially and environmentally will be to dispose of that in landfill. So we're talking about how do you understand how you can still deliver a quality service that your customers are satisfied with, but actually you're looking and concentrating on your margins so that you're making the best possible margin. And there are loads of business benefits. So we've done lots of global work, lots of UK work that describes and reinforces the return on investment. So there was a really thorough piece of work done by the World Resource Institute and RAP, looking at the return on investment. So for every pound that was spent, yielded £7 return on food waste prevention. So where you were introducing food waste prevention measures, that then yielded you £7 in return. So what they also identified was that actually without management buy-in, without empowering your teams and your staff to take action, you really, that's critical to making those savings. It's got to be built into the culture. It improves your efficiency. It has no negative impact on sales whatsoever. You improve your corporate social responsibility credentials, your environmental social responsibility. It future-proofs you for legislation and regulation that's coming, and overall it reduces your environmental impact. At a global level, it feels quite ambitious at a global level. So everything that we're talking about now is how can we all make a difference that contributes to this global action. So the United Nations have an array of sustainable development goals, and there's one specifically called 12.3, which looks at halving food waste by 2030, and that's the goal that we're all working at here in RAP and across the UK to achieve that. So the way that we do that, we have something called a voluntary agreement. It's called the Courtauld Commitment 2030. And that enables us to work across the whole of the food and drink sector and identify in a pre-competitive stage, where's the evidence of what the problems are, what are the proposed solutions, and how do we provide the tools that enable action on the ground, and also case studies to highlight what others are doing so that we can accelerate that pace of change and share good practice. And we also have something called the UK Food Waste Reduction Roadmap, which again is for the whole food and drink sector, but we have one just for hospitality that really details what we need to do to be able to achieve this very ambitious global goal. And here in the UK, we have over 1 million tonnes of food that is thrown away by the whole out-of-home sector. And the staggering thing is that 75% of that food that ends up in the bin could have been eaten. So everything that I'm talking to you about today is about reducing that 75% that ends up in the bin. Our research shows that actually, when you look at the purchasing of food for hospitality, it's higher than anywhere else. So the amount of food that is purchased that ends up in the bin is 18%. So 18% of the food that you're buying is being thrown away. So any change that you make to that 18% will be going straight onto your bottom line. So there's a lot of savings to be made. That's the really good news. And we've got lots of information. I don't propose to go through these in detail, but it's just to assure you that we have lots of detailed information. We've got lots of calculators to support you to understand how much the saving is on your bottom line, but also we can help you identify the carbon savings as well, which are also really increasingly important to staff, consumers, investors, and so forth. So we've got this campaign called Guardians of Grub, which is about raising awareness that wasting food is a problem in the first place. We're all about feeding people and not bins, and we want everybody to feel empowered to take action. This is about us all coming together as a collective. So we've got lots of materials. Again, I'm literally going to whistle through these, but ultimately this is about working together. We have this wonderful quote from the late great Albert Roux. around food waste being the enemy of the chef because it eats into profits. He was supportive of the work that we were doing with Guardians of Grub and states that no one's profits should end up in the bin and no one's food waste should contribute to global warming. So really powerful words there, and you can see that we've got support from lots of fantastic people within the sector. We've got loads of practical resources. Everything is free. It's on our website, so checklists, tracking sheets, guides, everything you could possibly need. And this is really what helps you identify where the savings can be made. So you split your waste into different categories. And if you're not ready to do that, just use a see-through plastic bag and just see what ends up in there. But if you want to go a step further and really get to grips with what's happening in your kitchen, then you can split your food into spoilage, prep, plate and other. In this case, it's buffet. So that then you, as a team, you can look at these numbers and think, okay, hang on a sec, that's a hotspot for us. Let's go and have a look at the buffet and understand what's happening. And over 4 weeks, you can start to see the difference that's happening on your site live with your teams, and all of the numbers that we've developed are around profits that you should see on your bottom line instantly as soon as you're starting to make these savings. So it's a really powerful tool. We've got loads of brilliant case studies on our website. This is a great one from the Ship Inn in Cumbria. So they started looking at they started tracking what was happening in their kitchen and actually started to look at reducing portion sizes because that was just coming back. I mean, Robinson's Pubs have done some fantastic work. There's another great example, the airport in Manchester. Basically saw that lots of bread was coming back from their burgers, so now they offer a naked burger and you can have the option to purchase the bread, and it made a massive difference to their food waste just instantly. I think there's another example from Robinson's where just by stopping automatically offering coleslaw on the side saved 8 kilos of coleslaw a week. Wetherspoons have noticed that on their breakfasts tomatoes weren't getting eaten, so they don't serve them anymore, and they've saved 6 million tomatoes a year. So these are all really simple changes, but you have to see them in order to be able to make them. We've got a free 15-minute module available on the Guardians of Grub website. We've had fantastic feedback, so I'd really urge you to have a look at that. You can see this is all you need to do to get access to that. It's completely free. And if that gives you a flavour for more learning, then we've got a Becoming a Champion behaviour change course, which we've been piloting for a couple of years and makes really big savings. So we'll share that through the network, but just on our pilot, which was also during COVID, so massive interruptions and problems with it, we still saw enormous savings throughout that. So and really great feedback from people that was beneficial to them. We've had fantastic participation, Elior, IHG. We've had the endorsement and support from Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality. So oops, I didn't mean to do that. That's our website. So there's lots of things that you can do to make a difference on your bottom line. So I've got some steps here that I can share with Deborah to follow up after the session, but really very whistle-stop tour, but hopefully giving you a flavour of what's available through the Guardians of Grub. And we love to celebrate what everybody's doing, those fantastic changes that you're making. So please do get in touch.
That's fabulous, Eleanor. Thank you very much. And of course, 2030 is not that far away, is it really? I mean, this is not something that you can just do quickly. It's a step-by-step process, isn't it, to reach those goals? And I know from my own experience, I've used and promoted the use of the resources on your website, and they are, brilliant. So ideal for getting the conversation going in your business. So one of the chunky numbers is the plate waste, isn't it? The amount of waste that, I suppose with my accountant's hat on, you could say, well, it's paid for, it's in the dish costing and so on. But to see the quantity of waste that's coming back, that's consistently, with the examples you've given, really does illustrate that we should be tackling that as well. And it will drop through to the bottom line.
Yeah, it really will. And we've also got some insights coming through. We're doing some research at the moment to understand where people are wasting food on the plate, what are the best interventions. So we'll be coming out with some great new tools later on this year.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose it comes back to, if people want tomatoes on their breakfast, then letting them choose those and pay for those rather than incurring that level of wastage.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's lovely. And thank you for those examples. So I think that leads really nicely into what you're doing, Sarah, at Cafoodle. So I know you've got an amazing product that's helping businesses to manage their food costs, and probably picking up on many of the themes there that Eleanor has talked about. So
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, but you go ahead. Go on.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, when I was working in hotels and industry, it was key for me to make sure that the chefs knew what their food cost was, knew what their wastage was. I mean, wastage, I'm going back a bit now. So we were starting to talk about wastage then, starting to look at it, getting the clear plastic bags, as Eleanor said, into the kitchen, that kind of thing. But it doesn't have to be software, does it? Obviously, I'm going to talk about the software today and how that can help you. But even if you haven't got software, get an Excel spreadsheet or just get a little tally list, because unless you know what you're spending and what you're wasting, how on earth can you control it? I think I really want to emphasize that the information is obviously power, not just on this, is it? But what the software can do for you is hopefully make it easier. It might not be easier at the start. You know, there's obviously a journey to get your recipes into the software and to get people to use the software. But once you've made that commitment, the software should make things for the things that you have to do easier to do. So be that costing the menu, showing the allergens, and now obviously we have to show calories in a lot of our businesses, and we're starting to show carbon as well. So it's not just about costings. When you're looking for a software, and I'm trying not to plug Cafoodle too much on this 10 minutes that I've got, but make sure that the software can do all these things that are coming on now. We've got people talking to us now that have a costing software in place, but want the extras, want the calories, want the carbon. You shouldn't have to use 2 different softwares. Yeah, that's not making life easier for you. Also, as well, once you've costed things, you know what you're playing with then, don't you? You know potentially what you can sell something for, although obviously market is going to dictate a lot of that, but you know what margin you've got, and if there's not enough margin there, then you can change items in and out, potentially change selling price, although I know that's not easy. Another thing that happens quite a lot at the moment is VAT changes, isn't it? If you've got digital menus and costing systems, you can easily cope with a VAT change if you want to reduce your prices or increase your prices. Because what the software does as well is it allows you to have digital menus. So if you wanted to, you could reduce your printing costs. Bit of a controversial subject, I know. Some people like to still present the guest with a menu, but it's choice, isn't it, for your business at the end of the day. If you want to save some money on printing, you can have digital menus as well. And that what then allows you to do is potentially flex your selling prices and make very quick changes if your costs change quickly. And at the moment, your costs are changing quickly.
So let me just pick up on some of your points there, Sarah. So lots of interesting things in there. So first thing is making sure that everything is costed accurately. So you have a standard cost for every dish that you're producing. And of course, that standard then controls the cost, or helps you to control the cost, but also the portion size. And you mentioned the carbon emissions per dish, which I know is another area that you're working in, as well as the calories as well. So we've got quite a lot of insight then into those items. And as you mentioned, the cost price of the ingredients is changing daily, isn't it? And it's gone are the days when you can sort of do all your costings and say, well, that's that job done and that's the selling price, and instead we've got to be constantly monitoring because of the quite significant increases in cost we're seeing with some items. The retail price index is around 9%, but the cost of food inflation is probably a higher percentage than that. So yes, lots of interesting points there. Now you mentioned about suppliers. So I think the relationship with suppliers has changed as well, certainly post-pandemic. Have you found the same?
Yeah, so a lot of our clients, well, we work obviously with the suppliers in terms of getting information from them, and it has changed, hasn't it? I think, and obviously I've got a procurement background as well now, so we can't beat suppliers up anymore. That hopefully has changed or is changing. you know, we shouldn't be expecting second deliveries in the afternoon. We shouldn't be expecting 7-day deliveries. All those things that were just the norm shouldn't be happening anymore, because they need to give you the best price, and they can't do that if they're running around after you with whatever it is you forgot to order the day before, kind of thing. So we need to be more organized. The software can help with that. It can tell you what you need to order, you know, and it can obviously send the orders to the suppliers. But there has to be a relationship, so that if the supplier does have to choose who it's going to send that limited quantity to, you know, you want to be first on that list and you want to be high up there.
So we're seeing sort of irregularity of supply, which is impacting on our suppliers, and of course for them the changing price is also a factor when they're purchasing too. So they
need to reduce, don't they? They've got fuel costs going on. They've got drivers that are needing more money. You know, their costs are probably higher than what we're seeing, because they've got it coming always, or as equally as high as what we're seeing. So anything that we can do to support them managing their costs is going to benefit us eventually.
And do you think, so many of our operations, we're perhaps working from first principles of preparing food from scratch, buying everything in fresh. Do you think there's a move towards using more pre-prepared foods to control some of the costs?
There definitely is. In some of work with some of the bigger 4-star corporate groups within the UK, and you know, these prepped products that you can get now are absolutely fantastic. Save on the labour. There is, though, the argument of, well, that's going to increase my food cost. Yes, it is. You've got to pay for it. And that's why we should be looking at holistic costs for that kitchen, shouldn't we? You shouldn't just be looking at isolated food costs.
Yeah.
You've got to look at your labour cost as well, and tie in the two, because overall, that is how much you're spending in the kitchen. Yeah, if one's really low and one's really high, that's not going to help anyone. So yeah, there's some fantastic prep products out there, and try and manage those two costs to look at your overall kitchen profitability when weighing up which way is best to go.
And it's always been quite a challenge for hospitality and catering, isn't it, to try and capture that cost. It's, you know, it's fairly straightforward to capture the cost of the food on the plate, but the cost of the labour that went in to put it onto the plate is far more challenging, isn't it? Particularly, you know, our teams are multitasking and doing a bit of this, bit of that, and very difficult to capture those costs. But probably in every other industry, they do capture the cost. You know, when a washing machine is made, they know exactly what all the different elements cost, and I think we've got to go in that direction to be able to capture that cost.
It goes back, doesn't it, to what we learned many years ago, like activity-based costings. Our industry shouldn't be any different. Like you say, if you're making something, you're preparing it, and then you're selling it, you have to know the overall cost for that. And I think typically, previously, sometimes in the past, we've been, I'm talking Hotel Pacific now, we've been a bit blind because we've always got rooms income coming in to support the food and beverage areas. We've got to treat them as standalone profit areas and account for all the costs in that way. Absolutely.
And what do you think would be a typical food cost? I mean, I'm often asked, well, what should my food cost percentage be? As far as I can see, it's quite a wide range, but what would be your view on that?
I would never give an answer, because only you should know that. Yeah, you can only tell what your food cost should be based on what you're selling. Even if you've costed your menu, until you know what on average your guests are going to buy and what mix you're selling at, you don't know your potential food cost. So it's really important, once you've costed your dishes, you're then monitoring them weekly or monthly to see what's selling. So to go back to Emma's point, as you know, are you just prepping stuff that isn't getting sold? Change it. And B, you can then see, well, what is my potential food cost? What should I be getting? Are the dishes that are selling too high a cost? You know, are the ones that are selling really well, is there some potential on the selling price that I can improve there? Then you'll know what your food cost should be. Obviously, there's industry standards, but they vary per location, per type of business, even per serving period. You know, is it a buffet? Is it a la carte, etc.? So you need to do your work, and you need to be monitoring it to see what your actual food costs should be.
The monitoring sales mix, absolutely critical. Trends and what the demand is at different times of the day, different times of the week, seasonality, and so on. So I think we have a question, do we, Hilary?
We do, Deborah, thank you. It's,
okay.
It's about somebody has read recently that Spain were going to introduce a compulsory doggy bag for every diner. And the question is, should the UK be following this example, or would we simply be better to reduce the size of the portions on the plate? And I think Eleanor's getting ready to answer that for us.
I am. I'll pop something in the Q&A as well, because there's a few links. But I think doggy boxes can be a really helpful option, but actually understanding how much plate waste there is the first step. That's the really important part, because if you're providing your customers with too much food, actually doggy boxes really firstly might not be possible if they're going onto the cinema or going out afterwards. Then you've got packaging for the doggy box. Then there's a health and safety thing, you know, that people have to then store it into the fridge as soon as they get home. Perhaps that, you know, there's all sorts of interventions. So it is a helpful thing to offer. And in fact, Zero Waste Scotland did a good to go scheme where they provided doggy boxes that were labelled up and so forth. And actually what it did was it helped build the confidence of the operators that there was a lot of food coming from the plate, and actually that helped raise their awareness that they needed to perhaps redesign the portion size back of house. So doggy boxes can be a really helpful offer, but actually portion size in the research that we did several years ago certainly seems to be an intervention that has more impact.
Mm-hmm. So sort of part of a bigger strategy around managing the portion size in the first place. Excellent. So Sarah, you've moved from being in finance to operations and in between. It's really key, isn't it, that operators talk to the finance team and to align the information. Do you have any sort of views on that in terms of what we should be focusing on?
Well, only in terms that it is, as you said, it is really key. You know, you have to be talking, if you're in operations, you've got to be talking to your finance team and vice versa. Finance isn't just this, hopefully, not just this office in the basement or wherever they are these days, at home or somewhere. They are on Zoom if they're not there face to face, or they can be contacted. Go and see them. And likewise, finance people, get out into your operations and see what's going on. Because unless you're communicating, unless you're knowing, sharing the knowledge, no one's going to learn. And you get to the end of the month and there's a bad food cost. Well, nothing can happen then, can it? It's way too late. So yeah, communication, learning, knowledge.
Absolutely, thank you. So Adrian, you've been in the hospitality industry a long time, I know, and you're teaching finance along with other operational topics at the Edge Hotel School. And of course, you've just published really useful book for the hospitality industry, tips for improving profitability in your hotel operation. You've been hearing what our presenters, what Sarah and Eleanor have been talking about today. Do you have some hot tips that you can share with us in terms of how to improve the profitability in the food and beverage operations in particular?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the reason I wrote a book is basically because I think that in our industry, we're excellent at customer care and making the customer feel special. And what we're not quite so good at is remembering that this is a business at the end of the day with costs and revenue and profit, just like any other. And a lot of the managers out there struggle to understand the reports that they've got. But more importantly, when they've got a negative result, they don't always know what to do about it. So we went out and spoke to a lot of the top people in our industry, the big names, a lot of them from Master Innholders, and got tips and put them all together and put them into this book and I'll go through. So I guess probably my number one tip right now, which I think everyone has touched on, is supplier prices, because it's as volatile as I've ever seen it. So I just popped over to the chef, and some of the prices changes for things like a breast of chicken have gone up 60% in a year. And you compare that to kind of ham that's gone up by 6%. Well, you've got to know that. You've got to, when you're planning out your menus, you've got to know that some items on your menu are going up exponentially and others are not. I think probably the most common mistake that people make is thinking that the supplier is your friend, that if you pay more for items, then the quality is better. That's definitely not the case. I have a little bit of a horror story for you, which is a supplier that rag rates the chefs in their town, and they have what they call red chefs, which are chefs that check every single delivery regularly send stuff back and always check them and negotiate their prices. And then they have a green list, which is basically the chefs who just order by routine and just process the order and buy whatever they need without checking the prices. And they're quite open about the fact behind the scenes that if they've got some sort of subpar stock, it goes to the green chefs, and they push up the prices for the green chefs, whereas the red chefs get the lower prices and the higher quality. And you've got to make sure that you either are a red chef or that you are employing a red chef. Probably the worst example I ever had is when I first took over as GM. The GP was 58%, pretty horrific. I went through the menu with the chef. You found this turbot on the menu with prawns and full fat cream and all sorts. And when we worked out the cost of it, it was nearly the same as the price on the menu because there was no supplement. So essentially every time you sold one of those, you were losing money. And unfortunately, that's not that uncommon in our industry. That some places I've worked, that the order process of buying the items in is almost a chore. And you wander around the kitchen looking for what you need, and maybe you've got a past stock, and then you pick up your usual supplier and you order everything that you need, and it's job done, tick, move on to doing the cooking. And other places I've worked in, this is a real military type job to do, and they check suppliers, 3 or 4 suppliers for every single item. They will negotiate, they'll pick one that they want to use and go back to it and say, I want to give you the whole order. But unfortunately, other suppliers are coming in cheaper. Do you want to match that order and get the whole thing, or do you want me to get 3 different orders in today? So all of that kind of stuff is going on in some kitchen, but not others. And I think it this time in particular, with prices rising for certain products, like I say, more wildly than I've ever seen, with this time lag as well, because particularly chicken breast and salmon is quite frightening, because salmon is going up by 60% per year at the moment. All of these things are on wedding menus that were booked two years ago, and there's nothing you can do about it. You set that price, and now all of a sudden your GP is disappearing. So what do you do about it? Well, you haggle and you adapt your menus wherever you can to reduce those items. Next door, I don't think I've seen salmon or chicken on the dish of the day for months for that very reason. The sales team all know that they're pushing different items than those two because of the price change. And there are lots of little, it's very difficult to find one big problem that solves all of your GP overnight. It's chipping away at lots of different things. So there are about 10 different ways that we found, convenient ways to chip away. And some of the things is what you said, Deborah, about theft, and that Sarah talked about with the supplies, and Eleanor talked about with sort of over ordering and forecasting, all of that kind of stuff. You just got to keep an eye on it. And I think that there are chefs out there who think that their job is to just cook the best food that they can and not have complaints. And they don't realize that a good proportion of their job is actually to reduce their food costs and do that as a higher profit as they possibly can. And I guess that's what this webinar is about, is to make people aware that everything that goes on your menu should be costed, but you also need some juicy ones on there that bring in really high profits, because you're going to lose a whole chunk, particularly at the moment with volatile prices the way that they are. I've never seen prices jump so much in such a short period of time, and it doesn't look like it's abating. It actually looks like it's getting worse. So you could be getting to the stage where your prices are going up 10% per month for some items. But others are not. Like I say, pork is holding steady. No one can really understand that, I guess, because pigs eat whatever, and chicken eat grain, so that's more expensive. But yeah, it is quite frightening at the moment, I think. So my number one tip, in actual fact, is always supplier prices, but at the moment it's an absolutely vital thing for you to keep an eye on.
That's great, thank you, Adrian. And you know, the point that we have to just keep monitoring really the situation. I suppose pre pandemic, when there were a number of factors that hadn't yet come into play, and you could sort of, you know, assume really things would be the same week to week and so on. But for now, as you say, I certainly haven't seen a time when it's been quite as turbulent as this, with all the different range of factors. And of course, as you say, keep monitoring the situation, and the more you do, the more you gain insight, don't you, into your operation. And it takes time. It's not going to be just a quick fix. So in terms of improving profitability, what can I ask each of you to tell us a bit more about the resources that you have available that we can then point our listeners to today? So Eleanor, I know you've mentioned some of the wrap resources. Would you say the Guardians of Grub would be the main thing to have a look at?
Yeah, because we've got you know, things in different formats depending on what stage people are at and how much in depth you know where you want to take that. So I would say visit Guardians of Grub. If you click on the resources page, we've got videos, we've got guides, we've got case studies, and if you are interested in doing that 15-minute course, that explains a bit more about the context, but also describes and signposts you off to the appropriate materials, just so that you can start tracking where that wastage is coming from, and then start to see some of those numbers. And because it's quite visual, the 4-week spreadsheet that we've got, it really helps to sort of see what's happening, and helps the team to understand, oh, actually, I saw this, that and the other coming through, perhaps if we changed it. And what we found anecdotally from people that use the materials and go on the courses is it brings everybody's got a role in the kitchen on this. And it's one of those things where we're all equal, and actually you need everyone to start talking to each other about what things are happening. So front of house need to get involved, because they understand what they're talking to the customers about, what feedback they're getting in the plate waste. So it really does bring everybody together to find those solutions. And it's just such a great opportunity to utilize the innovation and creativity and passion that exists within the teams to be able to feel good about something. Because I think the other thing, yeah, on a social level, nobody feels good about throwing perfectly good food in the bin, and never more so than now, I would imagine. So there's that aspect as well, of helping people feel that they can do something positive to make a difference.
Absolutely, and a really good starting point, I think, are those clear bags, clear bins, isn't it, to actually visually see the level of waste, and that's very sort of open then for everyone to engage with. Sarah, so in terms of the different tools that you're using within Cafoodle, what would you say would be, you know, the sort of the hot tips really in terms of what to look at first?
First of all, I just wanted to pick up on Adrian's point about suppliers. From my, again, it's a bit of a shout out, but from my procurement background, there are companies out there that do this for their main job. Yeah, so don't think, oh God, that's another thing I've got to do. I've got to negotiate prices and like that. Just, you know, there's plenty of other people out there that can do it for you, or benchmark prices for you, or whatever. Yeah, so use companies that are out there, and you keep your expertise. You, as a head chef, you're absolutely right. You need to be cost savvy and you need to be cost efficient, but you can get other people to do some of those jobs for you. So I wanted to mention that. Also on the waste, so with Cafoodle, we have a really, really simple waste tool that's based on the Guidance of Grub module. So you can count your different types of waste, record it by recipe or by dish or by individual product. So again, it is something that you have to do. It's another job at the end of the day, but unless you start recording it, how are you going to manage it? And then what I thought I would do, if it's okay with you to put in the chat, we do a 7-day trial. So if you don't use software at the moment, have a play with this. And just if you've got a menu that you need to cost and you don't want to do it manually, or you don't actually do it and think, oh, I'm going to have a go, I'll put this in the chat, and then you just can have a go and see how easy it is to use the software. It might get you into using tech.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. I think that would be really interesting for our viewers to see. And Adrian, I know you've got your book that's just come out, and also some video content. Do you want to tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So we put up a webinar to kind of the top 10 tips. Some of those are food costing, others are kind of ways to reduce your salary bill, so your energy costs, how to sort of monitor the quality of what you do. And I think that that's that last one is quite important. It ends up as kind of being my number one thing for improving hotels, because I think you'd be surprised how much money is lost from inconsistent quality. We're doing some research at the moment, so tracking 100 people going to all different restaurants, and at the moment it looks like 20% of people who go to a restaurant have some sort of negative experience, some fault that they've got, and out of those 12 highlight the fault and get it fixed, and the other 8 keep their mouth shut. Well, this is quite fascinating for me. Out of those 8 that kept their mouth shut, 5 said they would never ever come back again. So that means that every time you open your doors to a restaurant, on average, and some will be much higher than others, there are 5 people that are never going to return because of the quality of what you're doing. It has got an error in it. And that's quite terrifying. If you said to any other business, oil and gas and so on, that you're going to lose 5% of your customers every time you sell something, they'd be horrified. I think the restaurant meal is such a complicated product with so many different aspects of it. It has a very, very high error rate. And if you can get your quality to be better than everybody else, more consistent, you've got a USP without even having a USP. You just become the place that gets it right every time. So although it's a big negative, it could be a massive positive if you can get a handle on this, and that's why I think our industry focuses on quality all the time. So we'll talk about that in the webinar, and then obviously the book as well has got all the tips from industry people like Harry Murray and Danny Pecorelli and Sally Beck from all the top people in our industry contributed to that book. It's not necessarily my thoughts at all. It's a collation of all of the top people in the industry.
That sounds like a top read. So how do we get hold of it, Adrian?
Amazon.
Of course.
Amazon's a big place. You want to narrow it down a bit?
The title is The Practical Guide to, it's quite a mouthful, sorry. The Practical Guide to Raising and Understanding and Raising Hotel Profitability. And if you pop that into Amazon books, it'll pop up. That's actually the cheapest place to get it. You can go direct to the supplier, but it's more expensive, bizarrely. So yeah, Amazon's probably much easier. Excellent.
So an alternative reading on our sun lounges on our holidays this year. Excellent. Good. So in order to recap then, we've got a range of different resources that our listeners can gain access to. And I think the main point that I'm getting from our discussions today is it's really about interrogating your costs and consistency, isn't it? So consistency in terms of being able to manage the cost, constantly monitoring that cost, but also then from the customer's point of view, they expect the professionalism that every time they order that dish in our restaurants, it's the same. The portion size is constant, the content is constant. And so we're giving off that professional aspect to what we do, as well as being able to control the costs more effectively with that. And I just wanted to pick up, if I may, Sarah, you mentioned about the sales mix. Looking at what you've sold and understanding the profitability of those items. And I do think in the past we've tended to be a little bit reactive rather than proactive with this. So we tend to go with what the customer chooses, but there is that element of managing the choice as well, and to ensure that we're selling those items that are going to be the most profitable.
Yeah, very much. I mean, there's some of the bigger companies do a lot of this, don't they, in terms of psychology, where something is positioned on a menu and what it's shown with and what extras you can have with it. So there is quite a lot you can do. But yeah, you know, if you wanted to go low carbon, you could position those ones, get your vegetarian and your meat free in there that potentially are cheaper and have a higher profit margin, not all the time, but a lot of the time. So there's lots you can do on a menu to influence choice. There's some other things as well that I thought I would mention. I was talking to a few people this morning. So try and on your menu, try and don't tie it all down. So for example, vegetables, put seasonal greens or seasonal vegetables. So you can choose, you know, then you can serve what you want catch of the day or whatever it is, just try and make your menu quite flexible so that you haven't got, oh, I haven't got that, or that's off today. You know, it's a really flexible menu that you can keep up to date every day. And then buffet wise, I've got a couple of tips this morning. Some clients are smaller plates, whereas before there would be no one serving at buffets. People now are, if you have the staff to serve at a buffet, which in theory is giving you better service as well, isn't it? But a lot of buffets now are being served so that it's not as much as you want. And what else? The other thing I was going to say. Oh yeah, and then today I heard as well that so because of a lot of, so if you're selling afternoon teas or celebration meals that you would have given as a gift, so those gifts have been extended, haven't they, over the last couple of years? So you've sold a voucher for an afternoon tea 2 or 3 years ago. You're only getting the value of what you were selling it at 2 or 3 years ago. So there's another added pressure there if you're quite a volume-driven voucher place.
That's quite a challenge, isn't it? Because if you're redeeming that voucher, you've got this big expectation as well. You've waited 3 years for your afternoon tea, so it's, you know, the big build-up to it as well. So there's quite a lot of expectation to manage there. I wanted to just pick up on a point, and you mentioned it earlier, which I meant to pick up earlier, which was menus that are displayed electronically, which is then enabling you to have that flexibility. I mean, obviously, once you print a menu, then it's quite sort of fixed, isn't it? And fixed in terms of the content, but also the pricing as well, because there's nothing worse than, you know, lots of stickies going over the price, keep changing it. So with the electronic menu, you've got that ability to, you know, to change your pricing and also the content of the menus far more flexibly. And I think, I mean, my own experience is that as customers, we're becoming much more used to that format.
I think we have, and I think it's quite key how it's so QR codes. I think we are getting used to generally. People are taking their phones with them. Maybe you want to have an iPad or a bigger tablet if you're going to do it properly, and you're maybe got an older generation, or, you know, think of everyone accessibility wise. But I struggled on holiday. I remember last year or year before, where it's so tiny on the phone and you have to constantly go zoom in and zoom out, and then you got to share it around the family. So if you are going to do that, just make sure presentation wise, does it sit right on the screen? Have you got enough subdivisions so that it's easy to read? You know, can everyone get it up? Or maybe you have a tablet or something. There is good ways to do digital menus, and there's not so good ways. But it definitely helps if you want to keep that flexible pricing. And also we use it a lot. We promote it originally for choice of allergens, filtering by allergen, or, you know, low calorie or low fat, whatever your dietary requirement is, you can get all that information there, where of course you wouldn't be able to get that all on the paper menu.
So you mean the user can actually sort the items that would be most appropriate to them?
Yeah.
That's very clever, isn't it? Excellent. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of our session. So we've talked about where we can find resources, and so there will be an email coming out to all the attendees today explaining where you can find access to the various resources that we've talked about. And there'll also be some information about some online resources that we have available at Arena for Finance. We have quite a lot of tools and presentations and costing scenarios to help you with putting together your food cost calculation, being able to calculate then your actual GPs against your GP based on your sales mix, which is called the attainable or the theoretical GP. And all of these tools and techniques can help you to really just dig in and get a bit more insight into how to manage your food costs. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers today. Thank you so much for all of your inputs. Hilary, would you want to close for us?
I've actually had a question in which I love, and I'd love to hear the answer to. So can I ask it just before I do that? It's from a gentleman who says, "Thank you very much for the great information. We have the same issue now. So how do you deal with pricings for weddings or events booked now for 23-24? So we've talked about the previous picture, but this is a really great question. So what do we do now planning for the future?"
You know what, this was always an issue for hotels, that they're taking a booking out of the price now, and then they're buying the produce 2 years down the line. far less of an issue than it is right now. So within a house, for instance, I've got next door, we've got weddings booked, and the most common item that the bride chooses is breast of chicken, and the breast of chicken has gone up by 60% in just 1 year. And so their GP now has gone from 74% down to 67%, just from that one item. I'd love to say it's out of, I'd love to give you an answer, but you are essentially in the lap of the gods. If you price high enough to cope with rising food prices and inflation, you may well price yourself out of the market. And if you don't price high enough, then you're vulnerable to one item going through the roof, and you've got to supply it, unless you can convince the bride and groom to swap their menu choice to a cheaper one, which is not easy. Or even worse, some hotels will try and add a supplement near the time due to food rising prices, which makes perfect sense for a finance person, but whoever makes that phone call will be cursing you, no doubt, because that's a very, very difficult phone call and might cause more reputational damage. So I don't know if Eleanor or Sarah can help out here, but I think it's basically a gamble. You are setting your menu price in the hopes that food prices stay stable when you actually provide the food. And that's never really been an issue for the last 10, 15 years. But right now it's a big issue. And how do you set your price, and how do you choose your menus, bearing in mind how volatile the food market is? But Sarah's going to help us out here. I'm going to pass this one on.
Well, I've only got one suggestion, and I'm not sure if it's really appropriate, but I know in the past we've fixed prices for turkeys at Christmas and things like that. So we knew when we were negotiating for the big chains, we'd do all our turkey price, say whatever it was, turkey or the other big ticket items at Christmas, set those prices up months and months and months ahead. So therefore, you could do the same, couldn't you, for next year? You could negotiate your salmon and your chicken based on your most popular. The wedding, you know what weddings you're going to sell more or less. So you've got your volumes, and then it's up to the supplier, isn't it, to agree a price, and then the onus is on them. Then at least you've secured your price, and you can do your selling prices on that.
That's a good tip, Sarah. And I suppose the challenge is getting the supplier to commit to that, isn't it, as well? They're facing the same pressures as well. And I think from my point of view, I would suggest that perhaps it's not just the focus on the food costs, but on all the other costs as well. So if you're losing a few points on the GP percentage, look at how that might impact then on your wage costs. So perhaps you can make some savings there in terms of the preparation or how you buy in that chicken, so that you're looking at a holistic view of the costs, not just the cost of the food on the plate. But it's only a partial solution. I agree. It's a very challenging question, that one. I don't know, Eleanor, did you want to add anything, or do you think we've covered the options there?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult question, but we have heard, I mean, it's not quite directly responding to that, but there's also some movement in some venues, certainly, where they are charging guests for any wastage that is left, because actually, because of the principle of wasting food, actually the venue might have a policy whereby actually they don't want to waste food, and if the customer is generating the wastage, then they want to see a sort of a feedback, because that's wasted purchasing that the site's done. I appreciate that probably isn't the most popular suggestion, but it does emphasize where people have a very committed sustainability agenda and value of food. Actually understanding the value of food and the pricing of that can sometimes come across into engaging the consumers themselves.
So we can have our host saying, eat up your meals, and
well, or pre-ordering, because not everyone's going to like everything that's presented to them. So is there an electronic ordering system so that you can get exactly what people want, and if they don't want a pudding, then they have the option not to. We've got the technology these days to be able to do that, and people are familiar with being able to do that as well. So there's so much pre-organisation for a wedding. Is that something else that might help?
No, that's a very valid solution, isn't it? And portion sizes as well. Whether you want a full size or a smaller size portion, which might then help with that chicken cost in a few years' time. So yeah, they're all possible solutions that could together help towards managing this situation. So just before we finish, do we have any more questions, Hilary?
No, the gentleman who asked the question said that they're adopting a strategy where they're telling the guests the price we're offering is for today, and prices will apply what they are at the time of the event, and people are all right with that so far. So that may be another solution. It depends on your market, doesn't it? It depends on your customer and depends on your relationship with that customer.
Yes, absolutely.
And how much of the risk they're prepared to take.
I think at the moment you probably can get away with that because it's all in the news about food prices and people understand it. I think that the thought of doing that even 2 years ago would be terrifying to me. But I think actually right now, you're right to do that. You could get away with it because it's very at the forefront of people's minds.
We do it with foreign currency deposits, don't we, in times of volatility? So I suppose it's the same situation.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm off to buy some clear plastic bags anyway for me. So thank you, Eleanor, for that. I'll start my sign out because I know we need to close soon. But thank you very much for contributing your time. I've been upset. I could have just gone on this forever. I've got some chefs on the attendees that I can see, and I bet they're absolutely chomping at the bit to ask more questions and get going. And thank you very much. If you do want to know more, as we said, there's a video from Adrian with the top 10 tips on the Master Innholders website as well. I've put the links for everybody on the chat box, so do please check those before you go. So you've got those, and any questions at all afterwards, then please feel free to contact either myself or Deborah. You know where we are. Thanks very much for joining us on this very hot afternoon.
Yes, thank you from me as well. And don't forget our final webinar is next week, so 2 o'clock next Thursday, when we'll be looking at energy costs. So another substantial cost in the profit and loss account, another very difficult one to control at the moment. Again, as Adrian has said, it's all in the news, but what do we actually do in practice? So we've got some experts there to guide us through what the situation is at the moment and some of the strategies that they're putting into practice. So I do hope you'll be able to join us for next week's session. And as always, all of these will be recorded and on the Master Innholders YouTube site after the session. So thank you everyone.